Hello, welcome, please come in. Today, it's time for a one-shot, mostly because I had some extra time, and I let my patrons vote on the video, and they decided that Foebreakers and FF12 would be a good video to do, and I would never turn down an opportunity to replay FF12. So, we're going to be diving into a run where all of my characters will have the Foebreaker license grid, which should be pretty interesting. Foebreaker is a class that prioritizes physical damage to the expense of basically everything else. They have literally no magic access, other than Shades of Black, I guess, which they really shouldn't use. And while they do have a strong weapon type, it is an unreliable one. Axes and hammers have good attack and allow the use of a shield, but that power comes at the cost of consistency, with the damage ranging from very high to comically low. Most crucially, they also lack any healing options, which I'm expecting to be a bit of a problem. But, opening nonsense mostly handled, I arrive in the Giza Plains and Penelo joins the party. I don't yet have the license points for the weapon licenses I want, but that's okay, daggers are basically as good at this point. As I'm going about creating a sunstone, I do need to be sure to grab all the treasure chests I see. I'm going to absolutely be relying on potions for this entire playthrough. And yep, there's that axe inconsistency. Dealing sometimes more, sometimes less damage than daggers. I will get a variety of ways to augment my damage later, but for now, this is what I've got. A sunstone is now in hand, and it's time to crash a party. And into the Garuda Waterway. We can really see that inconsistent damage. Vaughn's axe attacks are dealing somewhere between 5 and 80 points of damage, which sure is something. Oh well, we don't have any other options. At least Foebreakers get shields and heavy armor for defense. Complete a shouting puzzle, meet up with Balthier and Fran, spam through a Gambit tutorial I do not need, and it's back into the Garuda Waterway. But with friends this time. And I do have some healing thanks to Fran having Cure by default. However, her magic stat isn't the best and will not really be improving. So I might as well enjoy my limited healing while it's even slightly viable. First boss is These Flan, which goes as well as ever. Fran can use basic fire for the first and last time in the run, and axe attacks often deal really good damage. Not that I was expecting this to be difficult. And there is nothing left interesting here. So it's time for the next boss, Firemane. So my damage is pretty good, even though I only have one axe user, and I mostly breeze through the fight before healing becomes an issue. Okay, that's a good sign. I mean, it's only the first boss, but still, that could have been way worse. Maybe I'll be able to just kill the bosses fast enough that healing doesn't matter? And in Barheim, I can finally buy Foebreaker equipment for the entire party. So it's hammers, shields, and heavy armor all around. Let's hope that ends up being enough. Otherwise, this playthrough could get a bit messy. And having 3 hammers is already showing off how much physical damage a party can, and should, be doing here. This is great. I mean, it'd be better if they didn't occasionally deal single-digit damage, but every weapon has a downside. Other than greatswords, obviously. And that good weapon damage means I can mostly just tear through Barheim with barely a thought. I mean, relying exclusively on Cure to heal is still not super great, but it'll do for now. And it's boss time. Mimic Queen likes to spawn little mimics, which would be scary, but there are 2 ways to deal with them. Either use AoE attacks to damage multiples at once, or deal so much damage quickly enough that it doesn't matter how many mimics it summons. I obviously do the latter and rush through the fight very quickly. I have to assume that I will stop being able to stomp bosses at some point, but it sure isn't now. Back to Rabanastre, and I recruit Basch. Per the standard, Basch will be in my party for the rest of the run thanks to his high HP and strength, and my other party members will be Vaughn and Fran. Vaughn has decent speed and the second highest strength, and while Fran has mediocre stats across the board, she does have the highest vitality in the game. Axes and hammers use vitality in their damage formula, and while strength is prioritized higher than that, it is still a damage buff. Before I proceed to my next destination, I have one quick side trip. Back into the Garuda Waterway, where I can lower the water in one area, run past the high-level enemies, and grab the Hornito. This is a hand bomb. It uses the same damage formula as axes, but it is a ranged weapon. Downside is hand bombs generally deal less damage and don't allow a shield, but the first is mitigated by the Hornito being a weapon intended to be picked up later in the game, and having a ranged weapon option is pretty useful. Square Enix did decide it would be funny to lock hand bombs pretty late in the license grid, but that is the direction Fran will be heading with all of her LP. Anyway, arrive in Bujerba, recruit Larsa, and it's into the Lusu mines. I can really just stomp my way all the way to the end, and then run all the way back. Not the most interesting of areas. I could grind here, but Foebreakers are managing to deal enough damage to get me through, so I don't really need to. back in Bujerba, and I can buy better axes and better armor. More damage is always nice. I can't afford everything I want, but I am dealing enough damage I should be able to make it through the Leviathan, particularly with Vossler on the team. And that is kind of true, but it's finally time to add a potion gambit to Vaughn's setup. Gear is still healing a meaningful amount of HP, but it just isn't enough to keep up with the damage I'm taking. That's gonna stay a problem, I expect. Anyway, next boss, room full of dudes. And I looked away for a second and everything was dead. So, go me, I guess? Good thing here is there's a shop in this prison, mostly so I can fully upgrade my character's equipment and buy healing items. On the way out of the Leviathan, I do pick up Infuse. This converts MP into HP at a 10 times rate. Awkward to use, but it may end up being useful. Next boss time. First up is to destroy all his helpers with an Aroga mote. My magic isn't going to get any better, so might as well burn these now while they're still effective. And oof, Arrow is doing some big damage, and my healing is absolutely not keeping pace. Good thing you don't have to reduce his HP to 0. I might have actually just lost if that were the case. Leviathan is done, albeit with some difficulties, and it's time for the Sand Seas. As usual, there isn't really much to talk about here. The Sand Seas are big, not that interesting, and can mostly be skipped. The only exception is the golden amulet hiding on this platform. This will give Fran the double LP she desperately needs to unlock hand bombs as quickly as possible. I do have to do a bit of off-the-path grinding to get the LP I need, but I finally get hand bombs 1. So, Fran can equip the Hornito. It was important that I get this here and now, both because its attack stat is almost double my existing hammers, and because the next boss is Garuda, the only required flying boss in the game. And this fight is just a mess. On one hand, my lack of healing means I have to play a decent amount of character yo-yoing with Phoenix Downs. On the other hand, my hand bombs are dealing really good damage. So, half really bad, half really good. Let's hope I can get that more on my side. And it's a mini boss rush time. First up is Demon Wall. Again, good news is my damage is great. Bad news is Demon Wall loves its some status effects. And once Vossler gets hit with Talega, I just don't have enough damage to bring down the wall. It doesn't help that both of the last torches sped up the wall. I'm just gonna try that again. I'm pretty sure I can win this fight if I play better. I have Vaughn spend most of the fight manually healing blind on the rest of the party. I could set up a Gambit, but I don't have many Gambit slots at this point, and I really need to prioritize Fran because she has the highest damage output. Okay, yeah, there we go. That's how you kill the Demon Wall as quickly as possible. Wraithwall's tomb is cleared out of everything I want, so it's time for the first Esper fight against Belias. And I managed to take out half its HP before I even managed to steal, so that's a good sign. Less good is Fyraja deals big damage, but I actually deal enough damage to end the fight before that becomes a problem. I am liking the high damage and quick fights, especially after Machinist and White Mage. I doubt it'll last though. That no healing shoe is going to drop at some point. And then this is going to be a bit more of a struggle. Final boss in the mini gauntlet, Vossler. This fight can be a bit tricky with Vossler dealing big hits at low HP. Instead, the fight ends very quickly. Fran gets auto hit with Berserk at the start of the fight, and that 50% damage buff and double ATB speed does not mess around, particularly when the Hornito is already stronger than the weapons I'd normally have at this point. Alright, refreshingly brief Vossler fight. Love that. Next, it's into the Giza Plains wet. Normal plan here, knock down all the withered trees to open a path to the southeast area. I've previously done this to access high-level moats easily. Foebreakers aren't going to benefit from moats. Instead, I'm doing this entirely because it's a very fast way to get items to sell for Gil. That done, I can head over to Osmone Plains, where a treasure chest has caught my attention. This treasure chest, which has the courtesy of having a decent chance of containing a new and better axe. It's also right next to an area transition. We love new weapons, particularly when they are free. In Jahara, we re-recruit Larsa and grab the Pheasant Netzook that I definitely already knew was here. This doubles the effect of healing items, among other things. This should do a lot to make the potions, and soon high potions I'll need to use, even better. Once I get the LP for it. Which is now, because trial mode is a thing. And that means my potions and high potions are better than ever. But before I continue on to the main quest, it's time for a quick errand. And if you've seen one of these videos before, you may be able to figure out what it is. That's right, it's time to take a Chocobo over to the northern end of the Wester Sand to grab the Berserker Bracer. Auto haste on Basch will mean double ATB speed and 50% damage boost, and that is simply too good of a boon to pass up, particularly on a class that was already dealing as much damage as Foebreakers can put out. Now I can head through Gulmore Jungle and into a root village, which means new armor for the whole party. I can also continue to stock up on healing items, because I need all the healing I can get. And you know the drill, next up is the hen mines to rescue Fran's sister. And as usual, actually getting through the mines is pretty easy. Having no healing doesn't actually mean that much when every random enemy dies this quickly. I do finally remove Fran's cure gambit. Much as I'd like this to be useful, the lack of magic lures or magic boosting equipment means it just isn't healing enough. Goodbye, cure. You were fairly helpful, if only briefly. Anyway, area over and it's time for the boss, a big old dragon. Tiamat can deal pretty good damage to my party, but thanks to axes and hand bombs, I can also deal pretty big damage back. The real problem with this fight is Disablega, because I can't cure Disable and just have to wait for it to expire on its own. Huh. You know, I hadn't even thought about the impact of having no remedy lures. That could end up being a bit of a problem. Like now, for instance, because it's time for the Elder Wyrm, which is basically just Tiamat, but with Sporefall. And all those statuses are a problem. I mean, I still spend most of the fight just trying to fight with the camera. Camera, can you stop staring at Fran's butt? That's not better. Good thing I deal so much damage. If I didn't, this fight would have been an absolute nightmare. Oh boy, I'm not looking forward to any of the status-inflicting bosses. They're gonna suck. But anyway, that's a later problem. For now, I can run through the Paramina Rift to reach Mount Baromises, which means new weapons and armor, and Larsa leaves the party. Okay, time to head south through the Paramina Rift and reach the Still Shrine of Miriam. The random encounters here are just as murderable as the random enemies in prior dungeons. Mostly. So I'm basically going to skip over most of the area. Really, the random encounters in this entire run are not usually the issue. Wait a minute, that's not double a high potion. That's only what, 50%? Thanks for lying to me, Wiki. Turns out the Pheasant Netsuke is a lot weaker than I thought. Actually, how did I not notice this before? That does mean the most I'm going to be able to heal is 2,250 HP with the Netsuke and a high potion. That's gonna be a problem. The zombie corridor. All zombies, all the time. Plenty of loot for money. Time for some grinding. And that done, I can actually progress, and it's next boss time. Venuskar. Bad news, my entire party is slowed due to the magnetic field in this area. Good news, Venuskar is made of wet tissue paper and crumples incredibly quickly. What a comically easy boss. Next up is Marius, which means it's time for Vayne and Basch to equip some ice shields. The little enemies all die incredibly quickly, and Marius follows suit. I barely even healed in that fight. Well, that was quick. Anyway, back to Mount Baromises, which means it's time to sell all my accrued loot, and buy new weapons and armor. Just in time to face down the next boss on the list, Judge Bergan. First, I use some of the acquire motes I got in the Giza Plains, and then just beat down Bergan. This goes very well, until it doesn't, because Bergan at low HP takes less damage and can actually do a pretty good job of outpacing my healing. I do still win the fight, but it's a lot tighter than I had expected. I'm curious to see how much longer this easy road lasts, because I expect it's not going to last forever. And with Bergan dead, it's time to begin the long trek to Arcades, through the Mosforan High Waste, through the Salika Wood, and a brief stop at the Phnon Coast, mostly to do some trial mode to get a good chunk of LP. Accessing some of the better augments, particularly HP boosting augments, should be very helpful. Then back to the Phnon Coast and into the Chichita Uplands. Here I pick up the hunt for the Tomato family and the key to access the arena. So I can head into the Soken Cave Palace, and this fight is very status heavy, so hopefully it doesn't end up being an absolute nightmare. Alright, so yep, the statuses are out in full force, and that is still a problem. And that means I'm getting a lot fewer hits than I'd like, which is really making the axe's inconsistent damage more annoying than usual. It's definitely a slow fight, but it doesn't take too long before I'm only down to one tomato, the Onion Queen. And hoo boy, if you thought that meant the fight was almost over, you are so very wrong. The Onion Queen is a menace. Her status of choice appears to be Sleep, which briefly incapacitates a party member, and for some reason seems to have an infinite evasion stat. Basch, what are you doing? Hit her. Seriously, what is happening? And on top of all of that nonsense, she can cast Curaga on herself. So, while I managed to get her down to pretty low health several times, she just keeps healing. This is a mess. Of all the ways for this fight to go, this was not what I was expecting. And because of sap slowly draining my HP and my inability to cure it, I actually run out of healing items. I just lost a 3v1 against a single tomato. That was awful. For context, that fight took 15 minutes for me to lose, and the Onion Queen was the only enemy for 12 of those minutes. Okay, so that was a slight brick wall. No idea why Onion Queen was so difficult. The status affliction and healing were one thing, but also, what was that evasion? I just couldn't hit her. Well, I guess I should do some light grinding for EXP and loot. I'm gonna need to restock on items, whether I win or lose next time. Okay, let's hop back into the fight and hope it doesn't suck nearly as bad. I may have just gotten a bit luckier on the damage rolls, but a minute in and 2 of the tomatoes are dead, including the queen, who forgot how to evade attacks apparently? So then I can just mop up the other tomatoes with relative ease. What was that boss fight? Okay, on to the boss fight that can be a bit obnoxious, Ahriman. This fight goes way better. While this boss can inflict doom, Ahriman isn't actually going to survive long enough for that to matter. And its mid-tier magic is actually helping me because my entire party has mirror mails to reflect damage back at the boss. Okay, well that was much easier than I'd feared. Sunken Cave Palace is weird today. And that means I have reached Arcades. I can buy new armor and finally stock up on X potions, which does also mean my healing has reached its cap of 2,250 HP, which is great for now, less so later. And it's time for Draklor, which can be a bit overwhelming in some runs with all the soldiers running around. Not so in this run, where my axes are doing pretty good damage. Usually. This area has a lot of treasure chests with modes, but those aren't going to be worth anything to my magic-deficient characters, so it's boss time. I do have to lose Berserk on Basch, so I can actually attack the drones, but my damage is high enough to take them out fairly quickly anyway. Once broken and Sid is vulnerable, it's back to Berserk and the fight ends pretty quickly. That's basically always an easy fight. Valfenheim has new equipment I can't afford, so I may as well progress so I can get to the best money grinding spot in the game. Sadly, I can't yet buy serums on the airship. I checked. Which could be a bit of a problem, but let's hope it ends up being fine. Fingers crossed! So it's time to run through the Golmore jungle to reach the Feywood, and it's next boss time, Reflesia. This boss can inflict disease, which is bad, and the area saps MP, which is not relevant. It is also very fragile, which is funny, so that was easy. And with Reflesia dead, it's time to do some money grinding against the Mirror Knights here, because they drop the best loot for selling. Then solve some puzzles and reach my next destination, Giruvegan. Big, imposing, and long enough that I'm really worried about running out of potions. Hooray. So, before heading into Giruvegan, let's do some more setup. And that means it's time to head over to the Salika Wood to fight the King Bomb to clear the way to the Nabrius Deadlands. Running through the Nabrius Deadlands gets me to the Necrohol of Nabudis, and here is hiding one of my favorite items, the Hermes Sandals. These apply auto haste and give a bonus to strength, meaning Basch can now have haste and Berserk at the same time thanks to Bacchus Ciders. And now it's time for Giruvegan. First up is Daedalus, who can deal big damage at low HP, and he's dead. Okay, well, that was real fast. Good news, I guess. What's next? Just like Machinist only, I do need to be very careful about my resources here. The dungeon is long, and my only healing is potions. If I run out, leaving and coming back is time-consuming. So, a big part of that is also just skipping fights, particularly when any enemy inflicting sap on me is basically permanent until I reach a save crystal. Oh, I forgot about Domain Calvados. That's Bacchus Cider, but for bravery. I'm gonna be saving that for later. Anyway, Tyrant boss fight. My attacks deal pretty good damage when the rolls are in my favor. Tyrant does have a lot of area attacks though. It's not super dangerous for the damage itself, but it does drain a lot more of my potions than I'd like. Oh well, only way out is through. Into the Great Crystal. Oh, I should probably set up status curing gambits. I didn't do it earlier because I didn't spend any LP on gambit slots. That should help with manually curing all the random statuses endgame enemies love to use. That done, the crystal itself is a mostly nothing zone. So it's boss time. Shemhazai. First up, I equip the Aegis shield I picked up earlier on Basch for higher magic resistance, then unleash the power of Berserk, haste, bravery, and an axe. I actually take out Shemhazai before she can even use any of her strong magic. Alright then, really seems like the deciding factor on whether a boss is dangerous is whether I can deal enough damage to them quickly enough that no healing isn't a problem. And before the Pharos, I can take some airship trips. This lets me pick up Dispel Motes for the next series of bosses, and serums to finally be able to cure disease. And it's time for the game's final big boss rush, the Pharos. No reason to pad this out, let's get into the fights. First on the list is Hydro, dangerous because it can inflict decent damage and loves to inflict disease and reduce MP. It barely gets to do anything before my very buffed attacks take it down though. Next up is Pandemonium. Similar to Hydro, this boss loses HP very quickly. However, Pandemonium also has an everything-proof shield it turns on halfway through the fight. It's not enough to change the outcome, but it does mean I have to waste a lot more potions than I'd like. And preserving my X potions may end up being a big problem. 2000 HP is just not a lot. Oh well, next boss is Slight. High damage, that gets higher as its HP drops, and it shows. The first half of the fight is more or less one-sided, but once Slight gets into high combo mode, things go south real fast. I'm doing what I can to keep my party alive, but wow, Phoenix Downs and X potions are just not doing it. Guess it's time to show off some quickenings. I don't need to do a lot of damage, but right now, all I'm doing is healing. Okay, good. That quickening chain was enough to take out the last of Slight's HP. That fight was really rough. Healing is a problem still. Gotta keep pressing on though. Lots of bosses left to take down. And next on that list is Fenrir. Fenrir is basically just Slight, but way less scary, and it shows. Fenrir can buff itself, but I have 99 dispel motes, which means those buffs are not super meaningful. That was way easier. And much as I'd love to keep pressing forward, I'm basically out of X potions. My healing has just been so limited, and having a ton of HP doesn't really help without better healing. So, I need to bail, teleport to Balfenheim, buy a bunch more X potions, and run all the way back to this point. Hooray. Okay, I'm back at the top, and it's time for the next boss on the docket, Ashmal. Start with my normal course of buffs, then throw out a float mote to negate Ashmal's most dangerous attacks. Ashmal is pretty durable, but some of these hits are over 8,000 damage. It is not a long fight. Gabranth, stop talking to Basch and die, please. Thank you. And it's time for the real fight against Cid. In Phase 1, the fight is boring, with Cid being very weak and not really able to deal any significant damage. In Phase 2, he summons Famfrit, meaning I now have a second target to deal with. I also need to drop Berserk on Basch so he can consistently target Famfrit while Cid is immune to damage. Cid does like to buff Famfrit, so the Dispel Motes I picked up are very useful. Basch does still have Haste and Bravery, which does a lot of damage. But Famfrit and Cid combined can deal some decent damage in return. Thankfully, my damage is high enough to bring down Famfrit without too much trouble. And once it's just Cid, the fight is basically over. Okay, that was the final sequence of fights before the final battles. So it's time to take the airship to the Bahamut to finish this. First up is Gabranth, but scary this time. Once he gets to low HP, his combo rate can absolutely shred through HP before you have a chance to do anything. Thanks to my buffs, though, my damage is incredible. My healing less so. And despite my best efforts, Gabranth is able to drop Basch, then tear through Fran's 8,000 HP. But the bubble belt I gave her buys just enough time for Basch to get back up and buffed and bring down the last of Gabranth's HP. Then it is the easy Vayne fight. I say easy, but my lack of healing is really being tested by these bosses. Even though this Vayne deals less damage, my poor healing is really showing. Okay, next up is Better Vayne. And much as I'd love Fran's doubled health, I have to switch out the bubble belt for a second Netsuke picked up in the Pharos. Vaughn just can't keep the party healed by himself. Not when it takes 2 full X potions to fully heal a single character after the Netsuke bonus. Vayne sure does like his cinematic attacks. Okay, so I've been using axes and shields because the hand bombs are just so much weaker, but it is time to equip both Vaughn and Fran with bombs. Their damage will be considerably reduced, but damage isn't really my problem. What it will buy me is positioning. Ranged attacks will let my characters spread out, so area effects are less likely to target more than 1 or 2 allies. Okay, I have made it to the Undying, but at considerable resource expenditure, so now it's time to turn off Vaughn and Fran's attack gambits entirely. Any time they spend attacking is cooldown on their healing. And I do have exactly 3 bubble motes to double the entire party's HP. It won't last, but anything I can do to delay my death is worth it. Including switching Vaughn to using X potions constantly. I need max healing. Okay, there's the physical paling, so that means Vayne is at half HP, which is good, but this is what I was most worried about. I can't just burn the Undying down as quickly as possible because he puts a pause on my damage output. And my bubble motes have either expired or been dispelled. Okay, damage is back on, and that was over 10,000 damage. Alright, nice. We're already in the final paling. Vayne is at 25% health. If I can just survive through this paling, the fight is over. There is the Terrifier. How much damage is that gonna do? A lot, but not too much. I can revive and throw out a Mega Elixir to heal the party, and then that's it. He's dead. Okay, well, that was a bit harrowing, actually. I don't think I've ever had to do that much menuing against Vayne before, jeez. And that is it. Final Fantasy XII beaten with only Foebreakers. And that was much easier in some places than I'd expected, and way more difficult in others. Foebreakers suffer for the same reason white mages and black mages suffer. They are really limited in what they can do, and while they are good at that one thing, they are inherently very weak in every other area. But that is it. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos, so if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone and will remain that way. For now, if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.